All right, welcome back to our last live session of the day, everyone. Moderating today's RAS producers panel, it is my pleasure to welcome back Jaime Stein, who is the co-founder of Devonian Capital. Jaime, over to you.
Hi, Jean. Thank you very much indeed. As an investor in early stage RAS businesses, I'm delighted to be moderating the RAS Tech producers panel today. A big welcome to Alejandro Rojas from AquaBounty, to Karl Øystein from Atlantic Sapphire, to Phil Gibson from LocalCoho, and to Steve Atkinson from Taste of BC Aquafarms. It's great to have you on the panel today, and a big thank you to RAS Tech for arranging this event. Let's start, please, with some introductions. Please, could you each provide a brief overview of your organization and a little bit about your own history with the business? And Alejandro, I'd like you to kick off here for us, please.
Thank you, Jaime. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for inviting us and participate in this panel. I represent AquaBounty. Our company, AquaBounty, has a long history of research that started about 30 years ago. And as you might know, we're farming our genetically engineered fish in our production line. And after a long time with lots of research involved, the FDA approved our fish for human consumption in 2016. So that's about 5 years ago. Right now, we are ramping up our production from 2 of our locations. One is in Prince Edward Island, and the other one is here in the US, in the state of Indiana, where combined we are producing 1,500 tons per year of Atlantic salmon, of our AquaBounty fish. In summary, AquaBounty is a combination of a RAS technology company that combines this technology with bioengineered fish in order to produce what we certainly think that is the most sustainable fish that is in the market. And in my case, I'm acting as the Chief Operating Officer for AquaBounty since almost 7 years already. Thank you.
Thanks, Alejandro. And Karl, would you mind introducing Atlantic Sapphire and a bit about yourself as well, please?
Sure, and thanks, Jaime, and hello, everyone. My name is Karl Øyhaug. I'm the Chief Financing Officer of Atlantic Sapphire and the Managing Director of Atlantic Sapphire ASA, the Norwegian parent company of Atlantic Sapphire. Atlantic Sapphire was founded in 2010 and is listed on the Oslo Stock Exchange. The company started out production from our Danish Innovation Center in 2011 and has been farming salmon all the way through to harvestable fish since. We have also, since 2017, built up what is our large-scale facility here in the US, where we have been in harvest mode since September of 2020. Here in the US, our phase 1 is currently a 10,000-ton facility. That's metric tons of Atlantic salmon. And that's just the first step. We are on our path to reach 220,000 tons of annual output in a decade from now. So thanks for everyone to attend here today.
Thank you very much, Karl. And Phil, please could you introduce LocalCoho and a bit about yourself as well, please?
Certainly, thanks, Jaime. So LocalCoho is located in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. It is a coho salmon farm that uses a unique mixed cell raceway technology that is in proof of concept. We are building this 370-ton facility as a proof of concept so that we can build out additional facilities across the country, and so we can stay close to the local markets and be the most sustainable footprint that we can develop for the species. For my own background and my path to get to this company, I have about 35 years of experience in seafood industry, ranging from production through large-scale marketing, retail marketing. I've been a consultant to the industry for the last 8 years, and during that, I was contacted by the founder of this company to aid in marketing, and got so interested in it that I became first an investor, then a board member, and then finally the CEO of the company. I've been an advocate of land-based aquaculture for at least 15 years, based on my experience at retail and what I've seen as far as ocean net technology and the shortcomings that's involved with that.
Thank you, Phil. And Steve, would you mind telling us a bit about Taste of BC and yourself? Steve, you need to come off mute.
There we go. I've got it now. Okay, it just popped up. Taste of BC is a 100-ton steelhead production facility in Nanaimo, British Columbia. We're one of the old men on the field here. We started we incorporated the company in 2010. We built in 2012, and we finally made our production goals and met our production goals in 2020, where we produced 103 tons, which is 103% of our target production. We maintain that production level. We harvest 2 tons a week every week, and have done so now for almost 2 years. So it's pretty exciting. I'm a bit of an outsider in this industry. I often introduce myself as a preacher by profession, a chef by trade, and a fish farmer by default. We've come in with a little bit of an outsider perspective, and I think that's really helped us overcome a lot of issues. We're at a really exciting time now that we've just finalizing a merger with Blue Star Foods out of Florida, where we expect to be on the NASDAQ by the end of this month. And we have some very ambitious plans to build about 20 new farms.
Steve, thank you very much.
Could you hear that?
We got that. We got that loud and clear. Thank you very much. So all of the companies on the panel today are currently producing fish, albeit some have got longer track records than others. I'd like to ask you a bit about the key lessons that each of you and your businesses have learned on your journey from plan on a page to commercial production. And Karl, could I start with you there, please?
Sure. I think there are many lessons along this path, and we as pioneers in this industry, we know that it's taken us a decade to reach where we are now. I think or if I should point out 2 very important learnings and lessons, I think one is the importance of having the right employees. You need people who have successfully done this in the past, know how to operate a RAS system, and know how to farm the species in question. In our case, Atlantic salmon. Without having those, I think it's going to take a very long time before you will be successful, because there is no turnkey solution for a full-scale land-based farming today. Also, I think that another thing that has become very evident, and more so for every day that goes by, is the importance of having access to the right naturally given conditions. Even though you're operating a recirculation facility, you depend on having access to stable, abundant amounts of intake water, and to be able to discharge your wastewater in a sustainable way. And I think with water being the biggest risk mitigant, both in terms of pure production, but also when it comes to product quality, I think that's also one of the learnings we've had, that if you have to depend on a too high degree of recirculation because you don't have the right water either on the intake side or the offtake side, then that means very high risk. So I would say those are two ones that we've learned so far.
Thank you very much. Phil, could you tell us a bit about the lessons that LocalCoho have learned? You might be on mute.
There we go. Sorry. I can tell you that as far as planned to commercial, things rarely go as planned. You have to learn to adapt and to juggle, and you need to be, sure of your funding, and you have to have enough funding in place to see you through these the changes in the plan in order to to be efficient and to not harm the fish. The other thing I've learned is that you don't get ahead of the game. You don't get ahead of yourself. You don't put fish in the water before you have a facility built to put them in. And I think we've all experienced that. I think it's an important consideration to have.
Thanks, Phil. Steve, could you tell us a bit about what you've learned over the last 10, 11 years or so?
Yeah, well, I think the greatest lesson that we've learned is that we just didn't know how much we didn't know. And that we thought we knew a lot more coming in than we did. We knew we were treading on new ground, but it seemed that the more we knew, the more unknowns that showed up. RAS is very complex because you're not just dealing with a system, but and living animals, but you're dealing with a living system. And it's given us lots of surprises. Several times along the road, we thought we had it figured out. We said we were at steady state in 2014, and then all of a sudden, the fish stopped growing, others just early mature, and we came through all those kind of issues. And it took us another 5 years to reach true steady state. I'd suggest one thing is yes, fish die quickly. I think that's real important. So the window is very short, but an important lesson that I've gleaned with watching the people who've done this along with us is how easy it is to spend yourself into a hole you can never get out of. So going into this, you got to be really careful with money.
Thank you, Steve. That's some great insights there. And Alejandro, could you tell us a bit about the lessons that AquaBounty's learned?
So having 2 locations in operation for more than 25 years allow us to generate a lot of lessons learned throughout the time, and we are currently applying them in our existing facility, and certainly we are applying them in our future expansion. Nevertheless, I have to say that, and I agree with Karl in this sense, that as part of the key lessons is that we never have to forget about the importance of the human factor when we start increasing commercial production, particularly. We normally tend to focus on equipment and investment and require also growth of the fish and the bioplan. Certainly, this is a very important factor, are very important factors, but it is only a piece of the strategy. I would say that our team members, the commitment, the engagement are the ones that actually make our fish grow faster, the ones that are oriented into details and optimize the performance and growth. Without them, actually, we wouldn't be successful. And in our case, we are actually currently working on a lean and continuous improvement program, focusing actually on getting rid of waste, increasing or improving quality, and generate, of course, customer satisfaction, which is at the end the ultimate goal for our company. In summary, I would say never forget about people and people management. That's the key for the successful of any RAS production facility. That would be my point here. People orientation.
Thank you, Alejandro. So RAS is still quite a young industry from an investment perspective, although it's attracted a lot of capital recently, thanks in many ways to Karl and his team. Looking back over the last few years, what's different about the discussions that you've had with investors, or you have with investors today compared with maybe 2 or 3 years ago? Have the interests and concerns of investors evolved? And are there any disconnects between what investors worry about and what you and your team worry about? And maybe Phil, if we could start with you there, please.
Yeah, well, I'll unmute myself first this time. So for us, funding 5 years ago was practically impossible. We'd speak to institutional investors or family investors, family offices, and we'd find them not understanding what it was that we were trying to achieve. There was much less understanding of real, true, sustainable salmon raising back then. And raising money from those people was almost impossible. So we wound up having to go to small investors and basically friends and family to generate our first funding. And then as far as we worry about investors that are only in it for the short time. They want a liquidity window within 2 to 3 years, and that's not how this business can work. It's just impossible to make that happen. With a private company. So, there's kind of a disconnect sometimes with the potential investors, and that they're much more optimistic about how much money they're going to make in a short time and how they're going to get it out. And it's like I said, that's not how this business works. And so you have to be rather selective on the investors that you have, and then also the complexity, and Steve and Alejandro both touched on this. The complexity of this business is mind-numbing to a lot of people. So it's really it's really quite difficult to have them understand just how intense this business and precision oriented it truly is.
Thanks, Phil. Steve, you've taken a slightly different approach. I think you've largely or entirely funded the business yourself, but I assume over that period you've been having discussions with investors. So how have you seen the kind of attitude of investors evolve and kind of what they're concerned about compared with how you think about things?
So when we started, investment in this sector was primarily relegated to NGOs and philanthropists. And realistically, most of the farms that were started in that early period were more in the business of raising grants than they were raising fish. And I think that led to a failure of a lot of them as well. But so we came in at a very early stage, and really we were one of the very few at that point that were looking at building a business. And we did have to finance it ourselves. We had some help along the way, little bits here and little bits there, but essentially we were on our own. So we financed our building ourselves. And when I started, I spoke often and said, what we think is important is a small success rather than a big dream. And it's okay to have big dreams, and you might get some people to come along, but ultimately, people who want to invest have one interest and one interest only. And if you think otherwise, you're foolish. But investors want to make money. Plain and simple, they want to make money. So we needed to build a success, a small success. And it's amazing that once word got out that we had met our production goals and we actually were doing it, all of a sudden we had people from all over the world wanting to talk to us about how do we move forward. And we found somebody that came along and decided that we were worthy, and we've merged now, or in the process, we'll be signing within the next few days, the final merger agreement with Blue Star Foods. And what they came to us for, they were looking for an investment, they were looking for sustainability, they were looking for something proven. They would never have looked at us if we didn't have proven production. And then a reasonable approach to say that made sense to how do we make this from a small success into a bigger success. And so we had to have a plan, and we set out right from the beginning to prove a modular approach that we could replicate. So we've now come to the table with something that is proven, that we have a plan to replicate it, not recreate it in a bigger scale, but replicate. And that got their ears, and they invested, and we expect that we'll hit the stock market by the end of this month. We'll be on the NASDAQ, and we expect investors will see that story as a very positive.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Steve. Alejandro, have you been talking to a lot of investors recently? I know you're a stock market listed company as well, and how's your discussions with investors changing compared with where they were 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah, so I would totally agree what Steve mentioned. He actually nailed it down. More than anything, investors are looking or want to see a return on the investment. Therefore, it's extremely important to have a solid business plan. And additionally, and this is what Steve mentioned, particularly in the RAS sector, investors are looking for the capability to demonstrate success. So before you expand, so they want to see how you did it and if you did it. Initially, I would say 3 years or 5 years ago, investors were more focused on cost to build, the CapEx, and the operational cost. They were very much interested also in how is that operational cost compared to cage farming, and they're still asking for that. But now the investors are, and I have seen them talking to them, they're better informed about the business, more familiarized about the RAS sector and the aquaculture industry in general. So this is thanks to more companies are getting into the RAS sector. And so investors right now are looking for reliability, which is very, very important for them. And the operational performance, and actually who is actually the team that is actually going to operate this, that can give guarantee that the business will be a success. So they're looking for the team behind. It is not just the investment, but it's the people behind that are operating this very large car, you know?
Absolutely. And Karl, you guys have been in the markets for a while, you know, raising significant amounts of money. How have the discussions that you've had with investors changed over the last few years?
I will definitely say it has changed. I think you don't need to go far back when the discussion was still, is it possible to farm salmon all the way up to harvestable size with the right quality? And I think that discussion, we're having with very few investors these days. I think we've proven that it is in fact possible. Now it's more about the details. And I think this is where the disconnect is narrowing, but there still is one. And namely that I think a lot of investors might be underestimating the technical complexity of RAS. I think others have mentioned it earlier in this debate. It cannot be underestimated. I think it's important for investors to learn more and get educated on what is it that makes what success looks like. And especially having a track record of doing this large scale, proving that you actually can do it, because it's a far way from going from a tiny facility and producing in small scale to doing this in large scale. And I think getting more understanding of that, getting more understanding of what are the natural conditions that are required to scale up, I think that's kind of where the next step of investor education needs to be focused on.
Right, well, thank you all. That's really really helpful. I wanted to turn to the question of steady state profitable production, which Steve has already talked about a little bit. So just wanted to ask the panel a bit about, have you achieved that state yet? And if not, when do you currently anticipate that being achieved? And maybe a little bit about the kind of biggest challenges to getting to that point where a project is kicking off, you know, regularly, the amount of biomass that you're expecting and covering the operating costs and making money. Steve, could I start with you there, please?
Sure. So, like I said, we have met true steady state. We've met steady state a few times in this process, but it sort of imploded and didn't turn to fruition. So in 2019, September, we lost 60% of our biomass to an outbreak of bacterial gill disease. And it almost finished us. But we looked at things and we looked at what had we accomplished in the previous year. we had just at that point got to the farm where our full farm was full with all of the fish in the farm staged to be where they should be. And then we had this outbreak. And we really wrestled, do we keep going or do we call it a day? And we ultimately came to the point we said, no, we've got it figured out. So we essentially started with a new start, which gave us a great opportunity to really prove that we could do. And that was September. And then between November of that year and November of the next year, we did 103% of our target production. All of the fish meeting market conditions, no undersize, no early maturation, nothing. So I think that was for us, really, really positive. And then to replicate that and meet our goals month after month after month now, really has solidified the fact that we know we've got it figured out. Just want to comment. One of the things I think it was Alejandro mentioned it, or one of that mentioned that it's very technically difficult. And I agree that technological challenges are bigger, but the bigger issue is the operational things that technologically we had figured out in 2014, haven't changed as much as the operations and knowing how to put them in place. So we're exciting. We've got a proven model that we think we can replicate and a plan.
Thank you, Steve. And Alejandro, could you tell us a little bit about your anticipated steady state stage?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we just started to harvest, so we haven't got yet into steady production. We are just starting to harvest our first AquaBounty fish about 2 weeks ago, and we are starting in Canada during the month of June. But the important part here is that, and this is kind of in line with what Steve is mentioning, we are achieving the performance that we initially forecasted. And it's very, very important to do it in a consistent way, batch by batch. And that gives us, in our case, the confidence that we can hit the market. We can do it. Obviously, when we talk about profitability, we're talking about the market prices, and that are very important to be considered here. But considering the operational perspective, I think that we have what we need in order to get into what we forecast as the profit for our production farms. So operationally speaking, performance of the fish, we are there, but we are just starting to harvest.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And Karl, can you tell us a bit about this question from your perspective, please?
Absolutely. First, I just want to quickly comment on what Steve said, that I think is very right, that operations is definitely truly important. But I would put it this way, that the operational complexity and the technical complexity go hand in hand. So one is the reason why the other is so critically important. But I thought that was such a good point. I want to just state it out. When it comes to Atlantic Sapphire and steady state production, our Danish facility, as mentioned, has been in operation since 2011, and there we've been farming more than 40 batches and gradually increasing the capacity. So steady state there we're currently at that capacity, and we are still ramping up the biomass after some challenges last year, but there we're not going to add much more. When it comes to the big project here in the US, phase 1 has just been completed, the 10,000 ton facility. And we are now in the final stage of building up the biomass so that we are at steady state production when both what we call our daily biomass gain matches what we harvest every day. And we expect to get there towards the end of the year, meaning that 2022 is going to be the first year where you have a first full calendar year where you have steady state production here in the US. And I think another thing that is very positive for us to see is that even though we're still ramping up biomass, we've been consistently selling the product every week in stores across North America. and have over the last 8 months or so shown that this is truly a premium product, achieving premium prices in retail. And that's also something that, of course, is crucial for the profitability of the company.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karl. Thank you. Wanted to talk maybe a little bit about the future. Now, I'm conscious of time. We've getting some great answers to these questions. I'm keen to do justice to the audience piece as well. So maybe just very quickly from each of you, a little bit about the next stage for your business and what it's going to need from a capital perspective, and about the investors that you're hoping to help you meet that need. But if we could keep that brief, then they'll give us some time for the audience questions. Alejandro, could you start us off there, please?
So investors-wise, what do we expect and what would like to see? Of course, we would like to have investors on board with a long-term vision that are familiar with the industry, the sector, and understand the business. Also, very important, what we're looking for is also investors that are intrigued and open to new technologies and development, particularly where we can actually have a better control of the farming environment. And I have to mention what I mentioned at the beginning of this panel is that our core business, it is R&D is part of our core. So new development, new technology in order to improve what we're doing is something that that we're always looking forward and in order to improve production. I also want to mention here that there has been an evolution on implementing in different companies and some environmental, social, and corporate governance practices that help us to be connected with the community, with our customers, and shareholders. So I see that also from the investor perspective, that is important from them to look at. So those are my points for this question.
Okay, thank you very much. And Karl, from a capital perspective, and where are you seeing your business's needs now?
Sure, and I'll be brief. So phase 1, of course, is fully operational. What is our focus now is the phase 2 expansion, which is just getting started as we speak. That's going to add another 15,000 metric tons of production to our US capacity and will be operational and in harvest mode in 2023. We actually went out last week and raised $120 million of equity. That, in combination with $150 million of bank debt that is currently undrawn, is the financing of our phase 2. So for us, the next kind of big financing chapter will be phase 3 and of course beyond.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Phil, could you tell us a bit about the future plans for LocalCoho and what that means in terms of need for capital, please?
Oh, yes, certainly. So we just closed a round of financing, in fact, this week, to help us in our current facility to add additional precision operational equipment to really increase our efficiencies. As we get to full capacity and we do this proof of concept, we intend by the end of this year to go into an additional round as we raise funds for our expansion facilities as we start to build them across the country. So we're going to be looking at a combination of equity and debt to get us there, and we have high level of confidence that we're going to get there.
Thank you very much. And Steve, you've touched a little bit on the merger and the coming listing onto the NASDAQ. Could you tell us a bit more about what your plans are and what money you're going to need and where that's going to get spent?
Sure. So our plans are pretty simple. We want to build 20 farms over the next 7 to 8 years, ranging from 1,500 tons to 3,000 tons, based on our module, and we'll replicate modules as we come. We anticipate being listed on the NASDAQ by the end of this month or very shortly thereafter. The private placement to do that is already fully subscribed, oversubscribed. And we're going to need about $500 million over the next 7-8 years. So it's very significant. And we think we're very well placed to do it. We're different than most of the other players. Our scale is different, but you know, we expect to produce a lot of salmon, and we think we provide a good alternative to the investment community.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to skip now to some questions from the panel, from the audience, because we've had quite a lot of audience engagement here. One quick technical question, and I'll maybe ask for a volunteer to pick this question up, commenting on strategies for purging. How much water per kilo of fish do folks use for purging? Would anyone like to comment on that?
I'll give a comment. He might not be, I know it's Justin and I know the answer. I think purging is probably one of our biggest challenges right now in the industry. We've got it figured out. We don't have off flavor issues. We've been consistently without them. And it's a combination of operations within the farm and the purging. And I think that's one of the biggest trade secrets that we have. And Justin's a good friend. He knows a lot of my information, but I won't tell him the full detail.
I can comment on behalf of Atlantic Sapphire as well on that question, because it is a very real topic in land-based and something that we've struggled with historically. But we also have control of that. If you go to a US retailer today, for example, Publix here in Florida, and buy our salmon, it has not been purged at all because we have so good water quality that it's simply not necessary.
Thank you very much. Phil, a question came through for you, but I think, Steve, it could also apply to you. So a question from Jamie Gaskill. Phil, are you convinced that 10 times 1,000-ton facilities will give you the scale and cost you want compared with one 10,000-ton facility?
Well, we're not going to build 1,000-ton facilities. They're going to be 2,000 tons. And the cost per kilo to actually build it for the production is a little bit higher, but our operational costs are considerably lower than the typical RAS operation. And to go along with that, given that we're going to locate close to our markets, our carbon footprint and thus our transportation costs are going to be considerably lower. Plus, we'll be able to locate in areas that have advantageous power and water costs and availability, and in areas that could be economically challenged, so we can take advantage of opportunity zone type of financing. So there's a lot of pluses that are not in the initial production costs of development.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, we're very confident of our numbers and our model. And we think there's significant upside cost to larger scale that a lot of people haven't anticipated. And the beauty of proving our model at the size we have, we know for certain what our numbers are. And then the ability to build these things anywhere is a real strength. So we think we're pretty solid on our numbers. We think we're pretty solid on our scale. And there's another question. I'll answer this real quickly while we do it. We think we can build them anywhere. We're going to focus on BC, but we can build them and probably will expand well out of BC.
Thank you very much indeed. Question from John Stubblefield for Karl and Alejandro. Question from the questioner. To those of us who've been around aquaculture for a while, raising salmon in the Midwest and Florida seems counterintuitive. What were the main positive factors that influenced your siting decisions? Were they cost-driven, locality-driven, resource-driven? What were the key factors, please? Karl, do you want to go first?
I can go first. Thank you for that question. It's a good one. Why are we farming a cold water species in tropical Florida? And the quick answer is risk and cost. And to give some more flavor on that, our clear experience after having this for 10 years is a little bit different than what we've heard in the panel debate so far. we firmly believe that you cannot build a land-based salmon farm anywhere with the same risk and the cost competitiveness, because if you don't have access to the right water sources, both on the intake and offtake and the discharge side, it will lead to either higher cost of production or higher operational risk. The reason why we are located in Florida is because of the unique geology you have here. Here we can use groundwater that every minute of the year has exactly the same quality and is both fresh and saline and available in abundance amounts. In addition to that, thanks to the boulder zone you have in South Florida, we're able to discharge all our wastewater in the most sustainable way without any negative impacts on the environment around us. So we think that that is kind of the most important thing to look for, and something that we've learned ourselves. Remember, we started out in Denmark, where we have a facility that depends on using water from the sea, and we know the challenges that that may lead to.
Thank you, Karl. Alejandro, do you want to talk to that in the Midwest?
Yeah, I want to highlight here that that the difference between the different RAS producers and is a species that is being farmed within the farm. And in our case, I have to mention that we're focused on our GE fish, and we need to comply with the FDA regulations. So in order to comply to that, and because one of the main concerns the community had with our fish is that what happens if those fish escape and we produce a natural disaster. So in order to avoid that, we implemented three, say, kind of large containment barriers. One, our systems has a physical containment barrier, 5 at least barriers in each unit of production. So physically, if there is any minor possibility that a fish escape, that has to pass 5 physical barriers. But additionally, and this is what I want to mention also, is that we implemented a biological barrier where we are only farming triploid fish, all female. So in case if they pass the physical barrier and they escape, they're only female going into the outside, but this will not happen. And because we are using triploid fish, they're all immature fish. They cannot mature, so they cannot reproduce. And the third one is very important as well. We are located in areas where there is no native Atlantic salmon, where any of our fish can be crossbreed. And additionally, the areas where we are located, during the summer, we have temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, and there is no salmon that can survive, and more importantly, reproduce at that temperature. And during the winter, we got into freezing temperatures, so they cannot actually navigate those rivers or creeks where we are going to be located. So this is the reason why we are setting down in the Midwest today. As you mentioned, Jaime, the location, the cost of energy, the market, the distance, all of those, water, quality of water and amount of water is very important. Those are very, very important. But in our case, additionally, we put these 3 concepts that are in place that are very important to comply with the FDA.
Thank you, Alejandro. Now we've run out of time. So first of all, a big thank you to the audience for those questions. That was really fun to get some great audience participation there. Alejandro, Karl, Phil, and Steve, thank you all very much for your time today and for your very insightful answers. I'm sure that the audience appreciated the session and your insights. I'll now hand back to Jean to introduce the next stage of the event. So Jean, over to you.
Thank you, Jaime, and thank you to all the panelists for an insightful panel there. I'm sure I speak for the audience by saying thank you for your openness and for sharing your expertise with us. So this concludes today's live events. Thanks to all of you who sent in your questions and for those for joining us at the RAS Investors Forum. If you weren't able to get your question answered, I believe that some of the panelists will be sticking around, so send them a quick private message if you'd like. We'd of course like to thank our gold sponsors, Atlantium Technologies, AquaCare Environment, Aquamayoff Aquaculture Technologies, InnovaSea, Oxygen Solutions, and Spreading. Thank you to our silver sponsors, Aquatic Equipment and Design, Integrated Aqua Systems, and Structural Armor. Special thanks to goes to our strategic partners, Control Aqua, NoFema, University of Stirling, and Virginia Tech, and to our country sponsor, or our country partner rather, the Danish Export Association for their parallel event. So although our live schedule is finished, the virtual trade show and exhibitor booths will remain open, so go check them out and chat with our exhibitors there. I also encourage you to check out the on-demand presentations that we have and connect with our sponsors on those platforms. If you miss any of our sessions or if you want to rewatch them, they will be available on this platform in the next 24 to 48 hours. In fact, some of the earlier sessions today are already online, so you can go rewatch them now. All of the content will remain on this platform for our next event, which is the RAS Roundtable Series on September 14th and the RAS Virtual Summit on November 3rd. We hope to see you for all those days as well. So on behalf of our RAS Connector Series team and Annex Business Media, we hope you enjoyed the day. Thanks for watching.